During this Black History Month, we take a closer look at African American history. A local historian and professor shares insights of America's painful past and tells our Carol Meekins why he's hopeful for the future.
America's Black Holocaust Museum documents the decades of legitimate oppression kept alive in this country long after slaves were freed.
White people in the South were angry that people formerly considered property were now equal citizens. Many turned to violence. In the years immediately following the Civil War, thousands of black people were murdered when they tried to claim their rights.
The virtual museum is a history classroom. Historian and Marquette University professor Robert Smith.
It takes us through the entire span of what we might consider modern history in reference to the African diaspora.
Included in the collection, America's own crimes against humanity.
Nationwide resistance to racial equality resulted in the reestablishment of racial subordination through biased laws, disenfranchisement, and terrorism, most dramatically enforced through lynchings. Racial terror lynchings of black people defined a shameful era in America.
There are visual depictions of the horror of lynching and abuse, many too graphic to show on TV.
We know that indeed black people were lynched because of efforts to engage in the political process, the threat of political power. But we also see black people get lynched by simply performing acts of dignity, by simply refusing to bow to white supremacy.
After the end of slavery, lynchings often became a cruel form of entertainment for white mobs. People celebrated with gruesome carnival-like atmospheres.
It's not only postcards, but also dismembering people and keeping those parts of bodies as souvenirs. Like this is a grotesque, treacherous, evil practice that is one of the most vile expressions that human beings have expressed toward another group of individuals who they deem the other. Lynchings certainly created this environment where that kind of heinous behavior not only was used to control a population and assert a sense of racial superiority, a fictive notion of white racial superiority, but it certainly turned into this evil form of entertainment. Where black bodies were put on display in the most horrific ways.
The founder of America's Black Holocaust Museum, Dr. James Cameron, survived a lynching. In the museum's collection, a tribute to victims of lynching. According to the records here, at least 5,000 African Americans were killed by hanging.
In most cases, there was never any punishment meted out to the folks who were the practitioners of lynching. And then also, in many cases, there was indeed law enforcement involved that were culpable in that process, either letting it happen or actually being a part of the lynch mob.
But this professor is hopeful for the future, noting that the ancestry of African Americans is built on strength, courage, and resilience.
As much as we need to teach the difficult histories, we have to also continually teach the rich, beautiful histories that show African Americans in particular pushing back against that kind of racial oppression, whether it was during the institution of slavery, during Jim Crow, or since the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, and even today. There are so many brilliant stories of black excellence, and we have to herald those. We absolutely have to do that.
That's from our Carol Meekins. For more stories like this, you can head to tmj4.com/blackhistory.